shouldn't be here.
The drawers always locked, but no one ever questioned why. The clothes inside were clean, folded neatly, everything was in place. But it wasn't the clothes that made the room feel off. It was the underwear. No one could have guessed what she did with them. No one ever really knew. It started when Lena first got hired at the small laundromat. It was a quiet place, tucked between two busy shops on the main street. The owners were nice enough, but they were old. They could hardly keep up with the growing pile of clothes. So they hired Lena, a young woman who didn't mind the quiet hours and the routine. At first, everything was normal. Lena worked the early shift, loading and unloading the machines. She folded clothes with care, making sure everything was neat. The customers came and went, their clothes clean and pressed, leaving without a word. But then there were those little things. Things Lena noticed but didn't say anything about. Some customers' clothes would get mixed up. Socks, towels, and underwear never quite matched up. It was an easy mistake to make, except it started happening more often. Lena couldn't help but wonder, who had left this, and why? One day, after all the customers had left, Lena took a deep breath and opened the drawer that the owner always kept locked. What she found shocked her. Inside the drawer, neatly folded, were piles of underwear, dozens, maybe even hundreds. They weren't from the laundromat's usual customers. The fabrics, the colours, they didn't match what she had seen in the baskets before. Lena's heart raced. She had always been curious, but now something felt different. What was going on? Who had put these here? Lena tried to forget about the drawer, but every day she couldn't stop thinking about it. She kept noticing things. How the owners were always busy in the back room when customers came in. How they always seemed a bit too careful when they handed back a basket of clothes. One evening, after another long day, Lena stayed late, cleaning the floors and making sure everything was in order. As she was about to leave, she heard footsteps behind her. It was Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, the owners. They were looking at her with strange eyes. "Everything all right, Lena?" Mr. Hayes asked, his voice low. "Yes, sir, just finishing up," she replied, trying to sound normal. But something about their gaze made her uneasy. She quickly grabbed her bag and walked out the door. As she stepped onto the street, the evening air felt too cold. The next day, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Every time a customer walked in, she couldn't help but look at their baskets. Was there underwear in the pile? Has it disappeared? It became an obsession. One night, after another late shift, she decided to stay again, determined to figure out what was really going on. She didn't leave until after midnight. When the shop was completely silent, Lena made her move. She walked over to the locked drawer and slowly, carefully, pulled it open. But what she found made her stomach twist. Lena's hands trembled as she lifted one of the underwear from the drawer. It was delicate, soft, and smelled faintly of lavender. It didn't seem dirty. In fact, it looked like it had been washed and carefully stored. But why? She dug deeper, her fingers brushing against lace, silk, cotton, underwear of all kinds from different people. Some looked brand new, others worn. Some had initials stitched into them, small marks that probably belonged to their owners. Lena's heart pounded. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just a mistake. She stepped back, breathing hard. What was she supposed to do? Tell someone? Call the police? But what if she was wrong? What if it was just an old collection of lost clothes that no one claimed? Then she noticed something else. At the very bottom of the drawer, hidden under layers of fabric, was a small notebook. Lena hesitated, then grabbed it with shaky hands. She flipped it open, scanning the pages. Her blood turned cold. Dates, names, descriptions of the people who owned these underwear, where they lived, what time they came to drop off their clothes, who they were with. Lena's breathing grew shallow. This was no accident. Someone had been keeping track of these people. Customers who trusted this laundromat with their clothes. She kept flipping through the pages, her eyes moving quickly over the scribbled notes. Some were short. Young woman, early 20s, works at the bookstore. Elderly lady, alone. Husband passed away last year. Others were more detailed. Dark-haired girls wear red jackets often. Comes in every Wednesday, leaves around 5:30 p.m, lives 3 blocks down on Willow Street. Lena felt sick. This was stalking. She slammed the notebook shut and shoved it back into the drawer. Her hands were sweating, her mind was racing. Had the owners been doing this? Or was it someone else? She had to leave now. But as she turned to grab her bag, a shadow moved near the doorway. Lena froze. A voice, low and calm, broke the silence. "You shouldn't have looked in there, Lena." Lena's heart nearly stopped. She turned slowly. Mr. Hayes stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. Behind him, Mrs. Hayes watched with narrowed eyes. Lena swallowed hard. I was just cleaning," she said, trying to sound casual. Mr. Hayes didn't blink. "That drawer isn't for you," he said. Lena forced a small laugh. "I thought it was lost clothes from customers. I was going to—" "You were going to what?" Mrs. Hayes cut in, stepping forward. "Return them." Lena felt her throat tighten. The air in the room felt heavy. Mr. Hayes sighed. "You should go home, Lena. It's late." Lena nodded quickly, grabbing her bag. She forced herself to walk past them, her body tense, waiting for something to happen. But they just watched her. As she stepped outside, the cool night air hit her like a slap. She didn't look back. She just kept walking, her hands gripping her bag so tightly her fingers ached. She had to tell someone, but who? The police? Would they believe her? She didn't have proof, just a drawer full of underwear and a notebook filled with names. What if they said it wasn't illegal? What if they thought she was making it up? And worse, what if Hayes already knew the police? What if they had connections? She had seen this kind of thing in movies before. Small towns, quiet people, dark secrets. The ones who spoke up always disappeared. Her stomach churned. She needed a plan. The next day at work, everything felt normal. Too normal. Mrs. Hayes greeted customers with a warm smile. Mr. Hayes hummed a tune as he sorted clothes. It was as if last night never happened. But Lena felt different. She felt watched. Every time she turned around, she caught Mrs. Hayes looking at her. At lunchtime, she went to the back to grab her sandwich. When she opened her locker, a folded note fell out. She picked it up with shaking hands. "Stay out of things that don't concern you." Lena's skin crawled. Someone had been in her locker. She shoved the note into her pocket and closed the door quickly. She couldn't let them see her panic. She needed proof. That night, she made a decision. She would go back. Nearly midnight, when Lena returned to the laundromat, she had a plan. She would take pictures of the drawer, the underwear, and the notebook. She would record everything. Then she'd figure out what to do. She picked the lock on the back door, something she had learned from a friend years ago, and slipped inside. The place was dark and silent. She moved quickly, pulling open the drawer and snapping photos, the underwear, the names, the disturbing details. Then she heard footsteps. Her blood turned to ice. Someone was in the building. Lena turned off her phone flashlight and pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath. The footsteps got closer. A shadow moved near the doorway. A voice, calm and steady, spoke in the darkness. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you?" It wasn't Mr. Hayes. It wasn't Mrs. Hayes. It was someone else. Lena's entire body froze. The voice was deep, controlled, but something about it sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't angry. It wasn't scared. It was calm. Too calm. She gripped her phone tightly, her thumb hovering over the screen. If she turned on the flashlight, she would see who was standing there. But that meant they would see her too. A long silence filled the room. Then the voice spoke again. "I saw you last night." Lena's breath caught in her throat. "I saw you leave in a hurry. I saw your hands shaking." A footstep, closer. "You didn't think you were alone, did you?" Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might explode. Slowly, she stepped back, inching toward the door. If she could just get outside. "Don't run," the voice said, as if reading her mind. "It'll make things worse." Lena's fingers tightened around her phone. Run or fight. She made her choice. She bolted. Lena sprinted through the laundromat. her feet barely touching the floor. She shoved past the folding tables, knocking over a basket of clothes. Behind her, the footsteps came fast. Too fast. She reached the back door, yanked it open, and stumbled into the alley. Cold air hit her face. She ran. Hard. The street was empty. The only sound was her own panicked breathing. She didn't stop until she was blocks away, her chest burning, her legs aching. When she finally slowed down, she ducked behind a dumpster, pressing her back against the cold metal. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped her phone. She fumbled to open her camera roll. The pictures. Were they there? She scrolled quickly. Yes, the drawer, the underwear, the notebook. She had proof. But now someone knew she had it. She had to go to the police. Now! Lena arrived at the police station out of breath, sweat clinging to her skin. The officer at the front desk barely looked up. "I need to report something," she said, her voice shaky. The officer sighed. "What is it?" She pulled out her phone and showed him the photos. "This. It's happening at the laundromat on Oak Street. There's a drawer full of stolen underwear and a notebook tracking people's movements." The officer stared at the screen. He didn't react. Lena swallowed. "It's serious. Someone was watching me. I don't know who, but..." The officer finally looked up. "You work there?" She nodded. "Who owns the place?" "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes," she said. Something flickered in the officer's eyes. Not surprising, not concerned. Recognition. He leaned back in his chair. "You got pictures, yeah?" "Yes," Lena said quickly. "All right," he said. He took a long breath. "Wait here." Then he stood up and walked toward the back of the station. Lena waited. A minute passed. Then 5. She checked her phone, scrolling through the pictures again. Her heart was still racing, but at least she had done the right thing. She glanced at the clock. 10 minutes had passed. The officer hadn't come back. Something wasn't right. Lena stood up and moved toward the desk. Then she heard his voice. The calm, steady voice from the laundromat. "Lena's here?" Her stomach dropped. The voice was coming from the back office. He was in the police station. Lena's breath hitched. No, this couldn't be happening. She turned on her heel and walked quickly toward the exit, trying to stay calm. If she ran, they'd know she knew. But before she could reach the door, the same officer who took her report stepped back out. This time he wasn't alone. A tall man with a stiff posture stood beside him. It was him. The man from the laundromat. The voice in the dark. He was wearing a police badge. Lena's stomach twisted. "Leaving so soon?" the officer asked casually, leaning against the desk. Lena forced a tight smile. I just remembered something. I'll come back later." The tall man tilted his head, studying her. "No need for that," he said. "Why don't you sit? Let's talk." His voice was just as steady, just as calm. Lena didn't move. Her mind was screaming. They were in on it. The police, the laundromat owners, all of them. "You took some pictures, didn't you?" the tall man asked. Lena swallowed. "I don't know what you're talking about." The officer chuckled. "Come on now, don't make this difficult." Lena's phone vibrated. She didn't dare look, but she knew who it was. Her best friend, Carla. She had sent Carla the photos before coming here, just in case. Slowly, she gripped her phone tighter. "I already sent everything to someone," she lied. "If anything happens to me, they'll go public." The officer's smile faded. The tall man's jaw clenched. For the first time, they looked uncertain. Lena took a slow step back. "So?" "I think I'll go now." No one moved. Then, after a long moment, the tall man sighed. "Go home, Lena." Lena didn't wait for him to change his mind. She pushed the door open and stepped into the night. Her legs were shaking, but she forced herself to keep walking. They weren't going to touch her. Not now. Not after what she had just said. But she knew one thing for sure. They would be watching. And if she made the wrong move, if she wasn't careful, she might just disappear.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel for more.